And now, it's time for TJ Wow.
Hello everybody, really great to have you all here. Really looking forward to a conversation. I'm your host today of the TJ Wow webinar. I'm the Deputy Editor of Training Journal, and this is me actually at Training Journal Awards 2017 presenting one of these glorious things. Sadly, I don't have one to keep at home, maybe one day, but it was a really amazing evening. But before you get to the gala dinner and the amazing celebration that is of all of your success, we have to actually get you submitting for your award, and that's what we are going to be focusing on today. Now, our webinars, as you know, we don't have PowerPoint presentations, nothing like that. It's all about conversation, and it's about you asking questions, getting really involved in the conversation. So you've got that chat window, you're all using it already, so please use that to say hello to each other, ask each other questions, comments, share things if you want to, all sorts of different things that you can share links to if they are going to be of use for each other. Also, what we have is the question and answer pod. It's at the bottom of the screen. If you put a question in there for our speakers, I promise you I will see that question, and I will do my absolute best to get our speakers to answer that. We've also got Debbie here. Debbie's been working on the TJ Awards, I think, since it started, and Debbie will tell us how many years that is. It's something like 12 or 13. So she is an absolute mine of knowledge. As I said earlier on, we've got John, our editor, who is tweeting on Twitter, so you can go and do #TJWow if you want to and get involved. You can use that anytime you like. Debbie says it's 13 years. Gosh, that's a little while. And you can go and have a look at all of our webinars, all sorts of content on trainingjournal.com, and find out information from there. So from here, I think it's probably about time that we go and get our video online. And I'm sorry, guys, everybody had their video ready to go, and I've gone and ruined it because I had been playing with it a little bit earlier on. So we'll have to start our webcams again. It was very smooth, wasn't it? That wasn't quite as it was supposed to be, but never mind. I like to do it to make everybody feel comfortable that they can make mistakes live online, just like that. Chris will need your webcam. There we go. We've got 3 fabulous speakers today doing different roles within the Training Journal Awards. So let's just have a really quick introduction from each of them before we start jumping into this conversation a little bit more. And whilst they're doing that, I've got a poll for you on the screen, which I would love you to go and fill in and just let us know, have you applied for the Training Journal Awards before? So I'll leave that on screen whilst we're having some introductions. So let's start with Chris, then Margaret, then Husk. So Chris, tell us, how are you involved with the TJ Awards, and what's your role? What are you doing?
I'm the founder and managing director of a rather bizarre marketing agency, and we just help people pick and enter and win awards. And I've been working with Debbie in particular since 2006, when I was just the year I started Boost, and we've been big fans of your awards ever since. And we've written some like 50 different winning entries over the years, so big fans and regular entrant.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Chris. And Margaret, tell us a little bit about what you do and what's your link to the Training Journal Awards.
Hello, good afternoon everybody. Margaret Burnside from Cape People Development. I've been involved in learning and development for over 30 years, let's just keep it at that. I've been a judge in the TJ Awards for 6 years now, judging various different categories. I love going to the gala dinner and feeling the amazing pride that I think we all feel to be part of the industry and hear some of the great things that people do. It's an absolute privilege to be a judge, and I'm really pleased to be here today to share some of the things that we see as judges that hopefully will help you with this year's entry.
Wonderful, thank you, Margaret. 6 years, that's pretty awesome. You've seen a lot go through that 6 years, so that sounds good. And Husk, tell us a little bit about what you do and your link to the TJ Awards. Oh, Husk, we've got you on mute. Let me unmute you. There you go. Let's try again. We're still not hearing you, Husk. This is a good start. So do you have a mute button on your headset? Try again, Husk.
Hello?
There we go, we've got you. Go ahead.
Yes, and after all, we've had all these fabulous tests as well. Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm still Husk and I've been working in learning and development and talent management for, I think, longer than everybody else. Not quite put together, but private and public sector, and I headed talent management in the NHS for about 5 years. My involvement with the awards was I was really pleased. Last year there was a new award, and that was for Best Talent Development Programme, and I was asked if I would judge on that. And I did, and it was fantastic, and it was so great to see some really good practice around the place. It was educational for me. So I was very happy when I was asked if I would head this year's panel for Best Talent Development Programme. So here I am, and this is one of those things I've had my arm twisted, and I'm here this afternoon.
We didn't have to twist it that hard, though, did we, Hesketh?
No.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. So these are the people that are here to help support you. I judged last year, actually for the first time at the TJ Awards as well. So I've got a little bit of insight, maybe not a lot, but a little bit that we can kind of add to that as well. So this poll that we've got, let me make this a little bit bigger for everyone to have a look at. And I just wanted to get a sense of, where are we at? So we've got quite a few of you who said no and not yet. I distinguished those just in case it was a no, never. I was kind of intimating that. Some of you have won an award. 3 of you have won awards. So if you want to, in that chat window, you could just share what did you win, what category was it that you won for. If you want to share, you don't have to if you don't want to. And one of you have entered, but you didn't get shortlisted. So maybe we can make a change for that this year. So thank you very much for filling that in, everybody. Let me hide that out of the way. And you've got the you've got the Q&A pod there now, so you can go and ask questions. You can use the chat window if you want to. But let's start with, first of all, structuring your entry. So you enter online. It's free to enter the TJ Awards. And what we've got to get from people, and as judges we have to read and see the value that they are demonstrating of their training. So let's get some thoughts on that. First of all, let's start with Hesketh, Margaret, and then go to Chris. How do you structure your entry, Hesketh, with a focus on demonstrating the value of programs to the learner and the organisation? What are you looking for as a judge?
I think there's the need for a story, but with a beginning and a middle and an end. And I think the first part, and it might seem obvious, is why are you doing whatever it is that you're doing? Because without that identification of need, some business requirement, why are you doing anything at all? And it can be quite surprising the number of submissions that don't have a good business reason. So a good business reason, then tell us what you've been doing. And the final bit, after it's all gone through, is some kind of evaluation, because that takes you back to, can you prove that you've done what you set out to do? Now, you don't always do that, and that's not a bad thing. You might end up doing something else. And if something fails, and you've learnt from that, and you're not going to do it again, that's good for you as well. So understanding why and did it work is very important.
Thank you very much. There's some good insight there in terms of what's the business reason for it and telling your story. And we were all nodding to that. Margaret, what can you add to that idea of structuring your entry to focus on demonstrating the value of the programs to the learners and organisations?
I certainly would agree with a lot of what Husk said, but I think in addition to that, the structure that tells a story has to start with how things were and then how things have become, with as tangible as possible a range of outcomes. Some of those might be typical business metrics, some of those may be behaviour change or culture change. What we're looking for is a very obvious change from how things were to how they are now, and demonstrating the impact of whatever that intervention was in between. And obviously different categories, we're looking at different interventions. We are really looking for that change, and sometimes we don't see enough of how it was to get a feel for how this is now so different. So really clarifying that helps me to see that the intervention has been, really quite an amazing intervention that perhaps people didn't expect. I would also agree with Hesketh, though, that if some things didn't work, we want to know that you tried something work rather than everything went smoothly, because I think that makes us suspicious, because that doesn't normally happen like that. So that real clarity around what's been achieved versus how it was.
Thank you, Margaret. Really great point there about the failure and what you've learned from that. Now, there's only so much room in an entry, but you can make a very small comment and the judges will pick that up. And if you get shortlisted and get to an interview stage, then that's when you can really expand on that and kind of and people can ask you those questions. But if it's not there in the first place, you've got to get shortlisted, and we'll come to that in just a moment and find out some more. And so, Chris, what are your thoughts on this? The structure, really showing that value to the learners and the organisation of that training. There, Chris. So let's just unmute you. It's all practice. You stay on mute till we have no background noise and it's all nice and quiet. And then we've got to do the unmute thing. There we go. So let's try that again, Chris. What's your point of view on structuring the entry to focus on showing that value?
Okay, well, this year the entry form has been changed from previous early years so that it is a plain text online form. And so you've only got words, and as Hesketh and Margaret rightly said, telling a story is absolutely right. But you have to tell a story and at the same time answer the given questions and earn the marks, because there is a very clear marking system and there's a very clear mandatory structure to the entry form. And it's very difficult to meet those three requirements. So creating a structure that tells a story and answers the question and earns full marks is the battle. The key thing here is to use headings and make sure your headings clearly say to the judge, I'm answering the questions, whether it's objectives or strategy and implementation. But also it forces you to tell the story in a narrative style, exactly as Hesketh and Margaret explained, is that you start with the big picture and the context and make it very clear how big the problem was, how big the challenge was, quantify it with 10 marks for context. So putting in quantities there, illustrating the scale of a mountain you had to climb, earns you 10 marks there. Then objectives, 20 marks for smart objectives. And these are not just tactical objectives like take up, completion rate, pass rate, but a strategic one, that what it was, measurable, that the business was hoping to gain, and put them down as clear, smart objectives at the beginning. And then at the end, you've got the results. So you've got 20 marks for your objectives, and you've got 30 marks for results. So it's a lot more marks to be gained from putting those two things together. It's a total of 50 marks just for the objectives and the outcomes. But you don't have many words. You've only got 200 words for objectives and 200 words for results. So as Joe says, you've got to just say enough to get through to the finals, but then you can really embellish it at the face-to-face stage and provide all the detail and maybe have some printouts of graphs. You're not allowed to use graphics either in the entry. And you're not allowed to use PowerPoint in the second face-to-face stage either. So in terms of structuring, it's all about the words and the numbers. And that's the challenge. So the winner will meet that challenge. So it's you.
Thank you, Chris. I think you make such a great point about the weighting of what the judges are looking for. And certainly when I was judging last year, the results, whilst they're important, they were actually kind of the secondary thing. The first thing I needed to see was, why are you even bothering with this? And what's the impact you intend to make, the problem you need to fix with this training? Because if that's not very good, well, I'm sorry, the results aren't going to be probably very good. Even if you're measuring bums on seats, which is often what happens in L&D, that's not what we're looking for. So I think you've made a really great point there. Andrew, you've asked a question now. I think Debbie's going to be answering that one. Debbie Carter, who's our editor-in-chief, she knows pretty much everything about the awards. So I'm sure she's typing away and she will get back to you. So we haven't ignored you, Andrew, at all, but Debbie's typing away an answer for you. Let's move on and think about actually some of the common mistakes. That's kind of, I think, where our conversation is going now. So let's start with Margaret on this one. Margaret, I might interrupt you if your audio is not very good, but we'll see how it is. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen in those last 6 years that you've been judging? And how can people avoid some of those big mistakes?
I think they definitely range from big mistakes to actually quite small ones around layout and grammar and typos. You really hope that people had someone else to proofread and look at stuff. But the biggest one that I've seen over the years is people entering more than one category but putting exactly the same submission in. So not tailored to the category that they're entering with no obvious reference. And particularly this showed up in judging L&D Team of the Year because there is some emphasis on the team. And in our experience, many entries focused on talking about a specific project that obviously had great results, but there was really nothing in there to indicate that the team were working well or working well together. So it was very clear sometimes that an entry had been exactly the same target. So Chris made the point of ask the questions, really look at what you're being asked and make sure you respond to that. So for me, tailor it, make sure that it is matching the entry and the category that you're in. There are probably others, and I'm sure the others will share, so I won't steal all of those, but for me, make sure your grammar and your spelling and your structure is reasonable and it's laid out in a way that makes it easier to read. That's obvious stuff. Surprisingly, it still comes through without that being good quality, but particularly make sure it's the right entry.
Brilliant, thank you, Margaret. And I've added a comment in the chat about that too, that I've seen the same issue, and I find that quite amazing. Chris, let's come to your thoughts on this one. You're helping people put their words together, is what you do. And what are some of the mistakes you see when people are coming to you? Maybe they've got their first draft and you're kind of going, no, let's start this all over again. What are those kind of mistakes you're seeing?
By far the commonest issue, and we often get sent at people who don't win an award, says, oh, I think it's because I didn't buy enough seats at the dinner. Here's my entry, wasn't it amazing? All these random conspiracy theories, and all you do is open up the entry, and Margaret and Husk would spot it instantaneously. This is one of those entries. It's one where you told the story you want to tell, but without actually answering the questions, and you make these great, big, bold assertions about, it's had a huge impact on our culture, it's had a massive impact on our staff attrition or profitability. And there is just no evidence to back it up. Or if you do put in evidence, following the Kirkpatrick model, you leap straight from level 1 to level 4 with nothing in between. And you're asking the judge to make an enormous leap of faith. And it's simply untenable. So the most frequent feedback is that you haven't substantiated your assertions. So that would be my pick of the common mistakes. And in that is the hardest burden of proof, which is cause and effect. So if you are, as Husk has rightly pointed out, put it in the business context. You've got some big mission about reputation or health and safety or sales or market share, something really big and strategically important. You rolled out training, but lots of people took it and enjoyed it and filled in happy sheets and completed pass marks. And then the judges think, you're now taking credit for an increase in share price or something really big picture like that. And all you're presenting as evidence is that people filled in a happy sheet saying, I think I will apply this in the workplace. So your burden of proof, that is a commonest mistake, in my view, is convincing the judges, like Margaret and Husk, who are sitting there looking to be convinced that you can take the credit for something really big and strategically important. And that is the evaluation challenge, that it isn't easy at all, but if it was easy, everyone would do it. But that is the single biggest mistake I see, and the thing that infuriates judges the most is this cause and effect. This cause.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely great point, Chris. So certainly in the awards I was looking at last year, there was that, and similar things where I was looking at it and going, well, what does that mean? I think there was one award entry had said we used virtual reality in all of our shops. It's like, I'm not sure you really did, to be honest, because I can't imagine all those overhead kind of mechanics and the great big goggles and everything on the shop floor when people are trying to get to their cottage cheese or whatever it might be. So, there just isn't enough information sometimes. And certainly what I did was go, I'm not sure, especially when you've got 5, 10, 20 other entries that are really clear, and I think that makes a difference. So thank you, Chris. And Hesketh, let's come to you on that same question about the common mistakes that you see.
I think both Margaret and Chris are right about what's in the entry and not wanting to give too big a leap of faith. But what I've also seen is some wealthier types of business think that they can submit a big flashy development program and consequently it'll tick all the boxes for us. And I don't think it's the case at all, because it's very easy, and this is based on working as a consultant as well and seeing what some businesses do. They buy expensive business schools to do a flash program not based on any particular need, and then don't particularly evaluate it other than at the top level. And you think, well, it's not surprising. If I got in a big business, did some expensive stuff with 500 people, it's going to do something. But so what? And what I want to see is a thought process. And sometimes you get a very small, simple program because of a simple need, and the organization hasn't got much money. And that can be really impressive too. So what I would say is, if you don't have a flash program and you're doing something really simple, but it's making a difference, then we'd love to hear about that too.
Yeah. Lovely that you say that, Hesketh. And we, every awards will say it's about celebrating success and telling the story. But the thing is, we really mean it, because it's about sharing that good value, sharing what you've done. And I know certainly when I'm speaking to people about writing for TJ, for example, quite often people will say, well, what have I got to say? What have I got to share? Who can I possibly help? And I'm thinking, you've got an amazing story. It could be a 5-minute little story, or it could be a 3-hour monologue. But the point is, it's about what you're sharing. Hesk?
Yeah, and that just reminded me, and it's public domain, so I can say our winner last year was Barrett Homes, and they were working with the Careers Development Partnership of the Ministry of Defence. That is military personnel that were leaving the military and were looking for careers and things. And they were developing ex-military to be housing development, the building site managers. I might not be using the terms correctly. And that was very successful. But they discovered, between being shortlisted and winning, on their evaluation, they had the idea to look at the rework on housing development. That is, how much after the site was finished, how much work had to be done bringing the houses up, the sort of snagging lists and that sort of stuff. And they discovered, this was just the boss decided, oh, I wonder, and he went off and he had a look to see whether there was a difference in the quality and the amount of rework between sites with military managers and non-military managers. And there was a big difference. And he thought, and what was really great was we discovered that he went, wow, this is fantastic. I never would have thought that. And we shared that too. We thought, this is really good. So you're doing evaluation amongst all the other evaluation, and it's evolving as you're going on and you're wondering. And that was fantastic. So didn't even think about that. And between submission and award, they discovered that. And you think, this is really stonking stuff.
That is pretty awesome. What a lovely thing to share. Thank you, Hesk, for sharing that. And Margaret, was there anything else you wanted to add? I just wanted to make sure that we'd covered off all of, any kind of other thoughts about the mistakes that people commonly make that you see, that we haven't mentioned already.
Yeah, I think some of the big ones have been mentioned, but I think that point that Hesketh made is it doesn't have to be big, flashy, latest technology. That sometimes is interesting, particularly where people have stretched themselves to learn something new and try something new in all the right ways, evaluating, etc. But I think there is something about getting across the story with that bit of personality, with that bit of actually there were some challenges involved in this that doesn't always come out. I think it's very tricky because you want to come across as supremely professional and glossy and we're really on this, but we do want to see that human element, and it goes back to the point about credibility and the point that Chris made, that if we make too bold a claim, we're going to be a little bit suspicious to say, well, actually, can they back that up? So there's something about being real, I think, that some people don't really put into it. So keep it authentic, keep it real, keep it credible.
Thank you, Margaret. Debbie says in the chat window, great point, Hesketh. We want to hear about innovation, and that often comes from those without massive budgets. You've got to be more creative. And Chris, you've got a couple of thoughts on this one before we move on to our next point.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on Margaret's point. In previous years, we've worked with TJ running workshops for masterclasses for people writing their entries. And one of the fun exercises is you get everyone in the room to pitch their story and spend a couple of minutes, or we gave them 90 seconds to be precise, to pitch their story. And they had a little while to develop it and fine-tune it with a bit of coaching, and then they all pitched. And when they weren't pitching, they were judging, so they experienced being, as Hesketh and Margaret are, seeing other entries through a judge's perspective. And then when you discuss the scoring, and people have to score and choose winners, and then you discuss afterwards, why did that story win? Why did you give that person the marks? And you wrote down everything that people said. Oh, I love the introduction, I love the passion, I love the narrative there, what a great example they included at the end. And you write down everything that people picked up on. It was actually the packaging of the story and the presentation and the energy and everything to do with how the story was presented that they picked up on, much more than the story itself. So it actually turned out that, as Margaret says, it is the storytelling. It's not, as Hesketh said, about spending lots of money and having the biggest bang. A lot of getting through to the finals is to communicate your story in a compelling way to the judges. And often people, going back to your point, Joe, about what is the mistake, is that they adopt something called award speak, which is this management speak style that's even worse than management speak. It is talking in a way that you think the judge is actually a judge in the court of law, and you use a very dry, boring language, when actually what the judges want is it's spoken English and a compelling story alongside all the facts, stats and bullet points. And that's often what's missing, and that's what judges enjoy reading the most and will lean towards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Hesketh.
Yes, what Chris said there, just a quickie. It reminds me, we shortlisted maybe one or two submissions, and they hadn't used the full word count. It's surprising you can get a picture really succinctly, or succinctly some people can give you everything you need to know and you go, wow. So don't feel you have to be exactly the word count or overspeak.
Yeah, very good point. He says not over speaking. Thank you, Hesketh. So let's move on. We've got a question in chat from Fran, and again, I think Debbie will probably be answering that. I can see that she's typing. Let's move on to, and then I think the conversation is kind of moving here anyway. I've got a good question from Holly. Holly, I'll come back to that one in a moment, I promise. Question here. So how can we maximise our chances of getting to be a finalist? So there's the award entry that we submit online, and there's various stages. We'll talk about those in a moment, Holly. That's around Holly's question. But how can we increase those chances of actually becoming a finalist? And that includes kind of which category or categories to enter. How can we get that better? Let's come to maybe Chris on that one first, then Hesketh, then Margaret.
Okay, well, this year there are 16 categories you can enter, and there's one overall winner, which is the best of the 16 winners. And it's not an even playing field. If you look at the categories, each year there's a very different number of entries. The best private sector or commercial category is typically, it varies from year to year, but that's one of the most popular ones. And then you've got a public sector and a third sector ones. And every entry can go into one of those three categories if it's repurposed. So those are extremely popular ones. And then you get the thematic ones, like Margaret's category about coaching. She's judging the coaching category. That is a very popular one, but it's nowhere near. So it's sort of tier 2. And then you get the individual ones tend to be sort of tier 3, less popular. It's still extremely competitive and a very high standard of entry, but in terms of volume, it's not as popular. So a good tactic with category selection is you're allowed up to 3 categories per story. And picking up on Margaret's point, what you don't want to do is just chuck the same content into 3 categories and hope that's okay. Definitely tailor it. And if you get through to the second stage, you look at the judges' profiles and you will see it's a very different type of judge. For instance, picking up on Margaret's point again, if Margaret's your judge in the coaching category, her interest will be on the nuances and how you use coaching in particular. She's very passionate, very knowledgeable about coaching. Whereas if, say, Husk was judging the best public sector category, because that's an area he knows extensively, he will be looking at things from what's the value to society, if it's a NHS story, value to patients as well as clinicians, and he'll be looking at it from a very different perspective, and you need to write your entry for a different type of judge and a different entry form. So go for up to 3 categories for a good story, but definitely tailor it, and you've just tripled your chances of shortlisting and probably a win.
Absolutely. And Debbie makes a great point in the chat that the thing to do is to draft your story before posting it online so that you can see the flow. I like the idea of having the story in your head, written down in a, just a Word document somewhere, and then mapping that to what you're entering, as opposed to kind of having to write specifically in those points. It might help with that overall flow. And so Hesketh, what are your thoughts on maximising those chances to go from being shortlisted to a finalist in getting to that award stage?
I think the presentation stage is really important, and I would say without exception, going from the long list, which we had 27 last year, down to the 6, and then seeing the 6. This is what you're talking about, isn't it? The 6, yeah. Everybody had done more evaluation and reviewed what had gone on, because quite frankly, things are going on. At some point you're doing a program, it exists, you evaluate, you might not have finished it when you put in, but now you've got data, or you might have finished it and now you've got even more data. So things definitely went up a gear. We also were able to see that real passion come through from people. They were talking about their programs. Sometimes people brought along a delegate, somebody that had been promoted as a consequence of something. And this, I would like to say, it's not a sneaky way of doing a fab presentation and we're going to be overexcited by it, but it's genuinely painting the picture and giving us a really good feel, because we know why it was done, here's somebody that's done something, and it's made a real difference. And that's fantastic. So for us, it's a great opportunity for you to really showcase the difference that has been made. And the stories, sorry, just to go on a smidge longer, I used to like presenting the soft bits, the soft data. Business always likes the hard stuff, finance particularly. And I was always getting irritated because I had stories that people were telling me. So then I started having sections where I pull the soft stuff together with the hard stuff. And then I heard Brené Brown. Anybody know Brené Brown on TED and other things? She's a American lady. I can't remember why or where, but I heard something, and I keep on using this now because she does it so much better than me. She said, stories are just data with a soul. And I think if you can bring in those stories as well as the numbers, then you've got a killer.
Thank you for that. I've just put that in the chat window. And Chris, did you want to add something quickly to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is a rational and an emotional side to judging, and the written entry is very dry. It's statistical. There's a scoring system. There's a structure, and it's about earning the marks and making sure you get a place in the finals. So it's like almost like an exam. You've still got to try and put in a narrative and passion and energy, but it's quite hard when you've got so few words you're allowed and such a strict entry criteria and scoring system. And as Husk points out, the face-to-face stage is the emotional side. The judges will vote with their hearts as much as with their minds, and that's why you need a blend of qualitative and quantitative evidence. So I'm just sort of saying absolutely, totally agree with you. See each stage is subtly different. One is much more rational, the other one is much more emotional.
Thank you. And Fran says, would you recommend avoiding pointed points? So Fran, I think in the system it's very plain text. So I think you can't do your traditional bullet point. You can do like dash, right, hit return, dash, right. And I think I wouldn't necessarily avoid it actually, Fran, because if that's appropriate for highlighting your data and separating it out and making it easy to read, and believe me, when you've got 20 or 27 of these to read, you want something that's easy to read, then go ahead. That would make life a lot easier for some people. We'll come to you in a second, Margaret. Let's have a quick one from Husk and then get Margaret's thoughts on maximising our chances.
Yes, just quickly on the bullet points, I would say definitely, because if you've got 10 absolutely fabulous bits that you want to tell us, that you're just bursting to tell us, then don't waste your 200 words on long sentences and things. You know, say, and it's been shown to prove, we've been able to prove, dong, 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 dong. Fantastic. But do expect you might have to prove it when it comes to the interview.
Thank you, Hesketh. And Margaret, so this idea of maximising our chances of actually getting considered for an award, what's your advice around that?
I think the two stages have to work together, and often when I'm working with other judges and we do our first sift, we will sort of mark, we will do the marking, and then we'll make some comments like, curious, I'd love to hear more, or this story's really got me intrigued. So there is something about that combination of data and a bit of personality coming through in the written submission that leaves us curious enough to think, I'd really love to hear this story come alive at the presentation stage. So you're selling the idea of making us want to hear more from the first entry. Once we get to the presentation stage, everybody has said what really makes the difference on the day is the passion, the emotion, the enthusiasm, and certainly in the category I was judging last year and in previous years, how that comes across makes a massive difference. We are emotional creatures, so we do respond well to that. And so it's very often the case that a written submission, we might put them in an order, we mark them, and we think, yeah, this is our top 6 in this order, and we get to the presentation stage and we completely reverse that. Partly because, as others have said, some new information may have come to light, but partly because people are able to bring along someone who says, here's how I've benefited. Many, many entries now, and technology makes this easy. I have a little clip of a video of somebody in the business talking about the impact it's had on them. All sorts of creative ways, because rules are no PowerPoint. It's amazing how creative people can be. Now, that creativity goes back to what we said earlier. Obviously, there are very large companies with huge budgets and access to amazing technology. Well, yeah, you can do that. It's the ones who, again, put real thought into doing something a bit different that catches our eye and gets us interested. So bringing interesting people with you. If it's all of the L&D team, then maybe we're not getting a broad range of story. If we can get someone else from the business to say, this team or these people did this amazing job and it had an impact on the business, it really does add weight and credibility to the entry. So think about who you bring, get that curiosity going, and then bring yourself, bring your personality, and let the whole entry come alive, and it makes a really big difference.
That's really wise words there, Margaret. Thank you so much about bringing that bring that entry to life. And certainly, you know, things like videos, they don't have to be humongous high quality. It can just be use your telephone, make a video of someone if they can't come with you. I've met clients, customers, people who came up with the idea in store in the first instance. And I think that painting the picture is really important. Last year, I judged on the Technology Award, and all of the presentations are wonderful. One presentation in particular, though, didn't actually show us the technology. So they talked about it was basically a version of e-learning, but they didn't show us. They didn't have screen grabs. They didn't have a tablet they could show us what was going on. And that was really lacking. So this is really important. And each award entry will be different, that you can paint that picture of what it really is that you've done, how you've done it, and then that success. So that's why kind of bringing people along with you is a really great way of being able to do that. So thank you very much, everybody. Let's move on to kind of our last major point that we wanted to cover. And I'm going to come to Hesketh first on this one, then Chris. And it's about kind of, it's a last point really of what do you want to see in the entries? What are those last bits of advice that maybe we haven't covered today that's going to be really helpful for people? So Hesketh, first of all.
Ooh, that one's a bit difficult because I think so much has been covered. What I would reiterate then is there's got to be a reason for you doing something. And I don't think your application will go past being looked at any further than that if you haven't got a good reason for doing it and you can show that you thought about, did it deliver something at the end. And I think that's the bottom line advice. If I think of anything else, I'll put my hand up, Joe. But quite frankly, I thought that was so good what everybody said so far. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Hesketh. And Chris, we'll come to Margaret in a moment. What else? What do judges look for? You know, what are those other tips that are really going to help people?
Okay, well, we focus very much on the front and the back of the story, the why you did it, the strategic need, strategic alignment, and then the outcomes and the business impact. Let's not forget it's 30% of the marks, and a 500 word, the biggest single word count chunk, is for the strategy and implementation section. This is what we call the quagmire. It's where you can completely lose yourself in far too much tactical detail. The judges are only really interested, we find this across all awards, particularly creative awards, in two things. One is the challenges you overcame, and two is the ways in which the program was unique. And that could be creative, innovative, big, very cost effective, very clever, very quirky, but the judges want to know why was the strategy ingenious, and you've got to make sure that you realise that you weren't firing from the hip, this was well researched. And they want to know how the execution was on time and on budget. Yes, they want to know about the learning experience. But they just want to know why was it wow? What was so special about this learning journey, the learning experience? With 30 marks there, and it's not just for writing out a laundry list of what happened on the day. You've got to spell out and help the judges get why it was exceptional, especially if like you've got Margaret reading a coaching entry. She knows all about coaching, so you've got to make your coaching feel particularly special if you're going to get her marks, I'm sure. Speaking on your behalf, Margaret, I'm sure you can back me up on that one. Over to you.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. And I think you make such a good point there, because it's something that we're definitely looking for that information. And if things are kind of way off the mark, then obviously that's going to be a challenge for us as judges. And I really like that point you were making about kind of linking it all together and telling that story about why it was innovative. And it's about innovative for you and in the context of what was going on. Some of the awards entries that I was reading are, bearing in mind I was on the technical award, they weren't necessarily the most modern, amazing technology. That wasn't necessarily the point. The point was to use any technology in an innovative way for that organisation and that need. And that's what was interesting, not using the latest, greatest, most best, amazing one. Margaret, let's come to you on this last point. What do you want?
Yeah, I think in terms of particularly the written entry, we want to see it quite punchy, quite easy to take in and understand, rather than the quagmire, the lovely phrase for it in the middle. I think we want it to be very, very clear, the steps, and easy to take in. As everybody said, we're reading a lot of entries, so it really needs to stand out and be clear what happened. Innovation is a really big thing, and I totally agree with you. That's not necessarily about the latest shiny. And I think it's avoid jargon. So it's interesting because I did notice a big increase last year in the use of 70-20-10. That phrase was used a lot. Not always, I know Husk's reacted already, not always in a way that I would recognise it as 70-20-10, but it felt like it was thrown in to show we're modern and we're doing, you know, it's not actually that modern, you know, but we're doing the latest stuff for the sake of it. So I agree with you, Joe, that innovation might be, you know, we had an interesting twist on something people have been wrestling with for a while. And it will depend on the category, what feels new and different. Sometimes the entries are like, yeah, but people have been doing that for years, you just got there, or, you know, that's not necessarily that groundbreaking. So we're certainly looking for things that stand out as a bit different. And I think if we look at the ultimate aim of this, the whole point is to use the awards to help the whole of learning and development understand and share how to do things better. So what makes your entry a good case study for other people? How will other people learn from this and pick up good practice and think, wow, I could do that in my organisation? So what have you got to help others learn? What are you sharing with the world? Because we're all in learning and development. The whole point of the awards is to share that and for us all to learn from each other. So what would you want people to get and learn from this? And we're looking at that angle. We're looking at, this really would make a good case study. Other people can pick that up and try that. So make sure we learn from it.
Thank you, Margaret. And Fran's just put in the chat window, i.e. no showing off. Well, a little bit of showing off, Fran. That's important, but maybe not. It's all me. Maybe it's not that level. Just a bit, Fran says. So, Hesketh, what did you want to add about this topic?
It was just a quickie going back to how you decide maybe what category and things is, or how you decide what you're going to be applying with, is think about what it is that you've done that you're really proud of that's been successful. Then look at the categories. The other way of looking at it is look at the categories and think whether anything springs to mind that you've been doing. But, and sorry, this is about me, but this might give you a clue as to maybe how you can apply and stand more chance in a category. Is I went for an award, and I was working at the time with a drugs charity, and we had an unusual apprenticeship scheme where we took people suffering from substance misuse, gave them qualifications and bits and bobs, and gave them work experience. Now, I was so proud of what we'd done. I was looking around, and at the time there was nothing I could apply for. And then I saw an award that was for Best Corporate Social Responsibility Strategy. And I thought, wow, working with this group of individuals for their benefit, for the benefit of other people in their position as well, maybe that ticks the CSR box. And to cut a long story short, the answer was yes. So think unusually about the categories. And that might knock the socks off judges too, to think, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Husk. Really glad to have that. And I think what we need to do now is to kind of have a moment of thought and reflection. So our speakers are staying. We've got Hesketh, Margaret and Chris are all staying online, staying on audio, but we are going to come off the video. So let's wave a quick goodbye to people. And what I want to do is move into some reflection. So if you've been on our webinars before, you know that at this point what we're doing is just kind of thinking, what are we going to do next? But before that, we need to test out the tool. So have a look at the T-Text tool. So if you look on your screen, on the left, you've got a version of what I have a screen grab of on the right. Click on the T-Text tool and then click on the screen, type in your name, and click again to reveal your name, like I've done. And we're just going to use that text tool very quickly, and then we'll move into the actual reflection question. So go and do that. Debbie's put hello everyone, thank you. We've got Holly, Chris, Fran, you've put your names in. Somebody's worked out that the very first tool, the very top one, is pick up and move things, so that's really good. And if you're having any problems, let me know in the chat window. And if you're thinking she hasn't read my name out, just remember to click once more on the slide and it will reveal your writing to everybody. So you're kind of going from an edit mode to a reveal mode. Okay, so let's move into the actual question. What are you going to do from today's discussion? And it absolutely does not have to be enter the TJ Awards. I'm thinking more like go and speak to someone, go and edit someone, go and write my story, go and research my business point. I don't know what that is from you, but on that, use that T-text tool to add something about what is your action point after today. And if that's not working for you, no problem at all. You can just use the chat window instead, if that's been working for you all along. So what are you thinking your action point is? Watch the other webinars. Yep, so we do have lots of webinars on lots of different topics. I think they're all pretty good, but I'm a little bit biased, it must be said. Let me put the link in the chat window, but we also do have that other webinar about why to enter the award. So that might be useful to go and have a look at as well. What else have we got? Holly says review the categories again and draft the application appropriately. Thank you, Holly. Rethink the categories, very good. Write my story, write a story, absolutely brilliant. Write a story first. We've got a lot of traction with story, excellent. And focus on what we're most proud of. Oh, that's brilliant. And what might be of most interest to share with the L&D community. Love that point. Make sure people know the TJ Awards team is available to help people enter. Absolutely they are. And Debbie's been very generous. She's always very generous with her time and her support on that, so you can contact Debbie anytime. What have we got? Lots of things moving around. Two things. First off, go and have a chat with the L&D team and harass them for evidence. I like that. And second, use the ideas from the chat to shape how I interview people and obtain testimony. All will help frame the story, etc. Absolutely brilliant. So some very, very good things here. So let's have some kind of closing thoughts and statements from our speakers. Let's come to Chris first, then Husk, then Margaret. Let's summarise today, Chris, and a bit of impetus for people.
Yeah, I think the first things you need to do before, I think there's a lot of focus on telling the story, which I completely agree, but I would probably sense check the story first. Make sure you can set big picture objectives at the beginning and then go to that leap straight across the narrative to the end of the story and sense check that you have got results to say mission accomplished and that you can actually show cause and effect to the program. And if you can do that, then tell the story and join that start and end dot, and you've got a nice linear path between the two. So I'd probably do that first, then tell the story second. My suggestion.
Thank you, Chris. That's lovely. And a couple of things have been put up on the whiteboard as well. One of them, sort of towards the top, says, go back to first principles. Don't do any L&D unless there's a business need. That's brilliant. I'm literally writing something about that right now, actually. So that kind of hones into what I'm thinking, certainly. And Husk, what are your kind of summary and closing thoughts for people going away after today's webinar?
Well, I would suggest that if you think you're not ready, you might not be ready, but double think it, because you might have a story to tell. You might have a different kind of L&D activity that you hadn't thought of, and it might be worthy to enter into a category. So just double check and don't be embarrassed about small and simple, because small and simple counts.
Absolutely it does. I remember one of the award entries, particularly, sadly it didn't get kind of shortlisted for other reasons, but it was a relatively small, simple approach, and I loved it because it was really focused. There was a need. It addressed the need, it had some great results, great learning points, and so on and so forth. Didn't have the most massive amount of data, wasn't about saving millions of pounds or anything like that. It was just one of those small, beautiful entries. So thank you very much for that, Hesketh. And Debbie says, good point, Hesketh, as you don't know what you're up against. That's a really good point as well, Debbie. And then let's come to Margaret. Margaret, what's your kind of summary or final thoughts
One,
for people?
answer the question, the good old exam advice, make sure you're reading the question and answering and responding to each section in the entry. But also remember, we are passionate L&D people judging. We're practitioners, we're in there. So we want to read about great practice. We want you to win. We want to, I shouldn't be saying this on behalf of other judges, we want to have a really difficult decision because the quality of the entries is so good. So really looking forward to this year's entries.
You're absolutely right, Margaret. Thank you. And I'd meant to say that earlier on. So you've taken the words out of my mouth, which I'd forgotten of. So that's absolutely brilliant. We do want you to win. We want to have to debate this, because it gives us joy to give you the award and to see that, especially at the awards dinner when people are going up on stage and they're shocked and there's whoops of joy. So I think that's a really important point. We're definitely on your side, and we are looking for reasons to get you to win, not looking for reasons for you to lose or kind of not get shortlisted. So I think that's a really important point. So thank you very much for that, everybody. And thank you to our speakers as well. Thank you so much to Hesketh, to Margaret and Chris. And they've been absolutely marvellous in sharing their insights and their experience with you. So thank you very much to them. Also, thank you to everybody that attended today in the chat window, all of your questions. It's been absolutely invaluable, and I really hope it's been useful for you. And Debbie as well is an absolute mine of information. So definitely go and contact Debbie if you've got any questions and want to know a little bit more. Our recording will be up on the website, so you'll be able to go and have a look at that after today and maybe share it with your colleagues if that is appropriate. If you're on Twitter, you can continue with the conversation with #TJWow. There's also the TJ Awards 18. Let me go and type that in as well. Is the thing you can go and have a look at there. And Dean says, when will this webinar be ready to watch later? It should be, fingers crossed, Dean, it should be this week, might be Monday, but we'll get it done as soon as we possibly can, I absolutely promise you. So thank you very much for that. Next webinars, we've got some more webinars coming up. You know that we have a rolling webinar program. And what have we got coming up in April? All about how learning is changing. In May, we're talking about artificial intelligence and what does that mean for us in our roles. And then in June, we're talking about whether empathy can actually deliver business performance results. So we have some really good conversations there. Well, that is it for today. If you want to get in contact with Debbie or John, please do. And we look forward to hopefully having an interview with you at the Training Journal Awards later on this year and having an amazing glass of champagne with you after you've won your gold award. That's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.